Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the campus of the Methodist Theological School in Ohio for the Consortium lecture, the World Religions lecture. A number of schools are part of this consortium and work together. The Pontifical College Josephinum, Trinity Lutheran, Bexley Hall Seabury Western. Together we do a number of things. One of the most important things we do every year is this lecture. We're very grateful to Dr. Numerick for his work doing wonderful things on behalf of all of the schools, and in particular tonight for this lecture. We're more than 10 years in now of wonderful experience each year, so I wonder if you would get us started. Welcome.
Thank you, President Rundell. Welcome to all of you, those who are regulars, have been here before, and those who are first-timers. I say every year there's no other place I'd rather be tonight, and I'm thankful that you think the same. There is a brief description of the consortium on the back of your program, if you want to take a look at that sometime. I want to recognize just a few individuals that are here tonight, in case you want to ask them after the program about seminary education today, about what the consortium does, about what each school does. So let me just recognize those few individuals now. You've met President J. Rundell, president of the Methodist Theological School in Ohio, also the president this year of the consortium, the Theological Consortium. Also here from MTSO is Dean Lisa Withrow, and I'm going to have them stand so that you can see them and talk to them later. So Lisa is there. From the Pontifical College Josephinum, Carrie Cahall is here. From Trinity Lutheran Seminary, Associate Dean Diane Hymans. All right. And from Bexley Hall Seabury Western, Dean Tom Ferguson. All right. Thank you. Say just a few words before I introduce the speaker. You might be wondering why the consortium chose this topic, Religions of India in America. The title for the series of these lectures includes the phrase world religions. So we feel it is important to recognize the presence and the significance of our religious neighbors. Central Ohio is now home to nearly 20 temples and centers serving religious groups who trace their origins to India. This includes several temples near this campus. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this lecture at this location. Delaware, Lewis Center, and Powell. According to the 2010 census, Indians are the largest Asian population group in both Delaware and Franklin counties. We also feel it is important to seek to understand the experiences of these groups, which may differ greatly from our own experiences, culturally as well as religiously. How did we decide which groups qualify as religions of India? And I'll take responsibility for that. The real world of religions is so complex that any attempt like this to categorize is very risky. I had in mind those groups who originated in India and have had a long, uninterrupted history there. So that would include Hindus, Jains, Sikhs, and other groups that don't self-identify with any of those terms, but indeed originated in India. Now, we know there are many Muslims and Christians in India, but those religions originated in the Middle East. And we know that Buddhism originated in India, but its presence there came to a virtual end in the Middle Ages and has only recently revived. Now, why did we choose to focus on religions of India in America? Because they are often overlooked. In this post-9/11 America, we have understandably focused on the so-called Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. But I have often wondered whether other religions are saying, hey, don't forget about us. And so tonight we will go a long way in not forgetting, but in recognizing and understanding those other groups, the groups that come from India, with the expert help of our speaker. Now, I first met Dr. Vasudha Narayanan at her plenary speech at the Midwest region of the American Academy of Religion some years ago. We liked her so much we invited her back. We gave 2 plenary speeches there. I was impressed. She gave a slideshow then that probably is somewhat similar to what she will give tonight, and I remember it distinctly. Her broad knowledge and keen insight into the experiences of diaspora religious groups. That is, those groups who practice traditional religions outside of the traditional homelands. Now, I'm sure you're duly impressed with the brief resume that you find on the back of your programs, and it is brief. There is so much more to say. You see there her current position as a distinguished professor and her many professional and scholarly accomplishments. I just want to fill in between some of the lines on that in order to give just a glimpse of her many interests. So her books include these titles: Hinduism, published by Oxford University Press, in English, translated now into 4 other languages. Another book titled Monastic Life in the Christian and Hindu Traditions. And another book, The Hindu Traditions in the United States, Temple Space, Domestic Space, and Cyberspace. That one is forthcoming. Now, her articles and chapters in books and so forth take up pages. I'll just share with you a few titles to show her breadth of scholarship. One title, a chapter in a book, One Tree is Equal to 10 Suns, Some Hindu Responses to the Problems of Ecology, Population, and Consumerism. Now, for my students currently here at MTSO, they are reading that chapter in 2 weeks. Yes, they know that. Another article, Hindu Attitudes to Genetically Modified Food. Gender in a Devotional Universe. Performing Arts, Reforming Rituals, Women and Social Change in India. Gurus and Goddesses, Deities and Devotees. The Jain Tradition, the Sikh Tradition. Diverse Responses to Diverse Christianities, plural, in India. And a last example, Grace, Liberation, and Human Action, published by the Lutheran World Federation. That's impressive. You should see the whole CV. Since she hit the ground in Central Ohio yesterday, she has been on a tour of temples and even restaurants. I took her to the restaurant. Those of you who know me, I had to take her to an Indian restaurant. Even in this short time, I have learned so much from her expertise and knowledge, even more than I knew before from reading her work. And so we are very honored to welcome Dr. Vasudha Narayanan to Central Ohio and eagerly wait her remarks on this topic, Religions of India in America.
Thank you so much for having me here today. A very, very special thanks to President Rondell, Professor Numeric, and 2 special people who made this a wonderful trip, Amanda Randava from OSU and Kathleen Ebling. Kathy, thank you so much for all your help. Really appreciate it. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here to go temple hopping with Amanda all of yesterday, and that's all we've been doing. I'd like to begin by showing you 2 pictures. This is the Hindu goddess of learning and performing arts, Saraswati. We have many goddesses and gods, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. But this is Saraswati. And this is a story which shows a Hindu narrative from many, many texts. It's called The Churning of the Ocean of Milk. And you may wonder where you find these. This is Saraswati, and this is the churning of the ocean of milk. Well, the churning of the ocean of milk is in the Royal Embassy of Cambodia in Washington, D.C. And the Saraswati is outside the Indonesian embassy, not India. And the second story which is a Hindu narrative, is outside Cambodia. It's just a way of telling you how global religions are, and not just Hinduism. The Sikh tradition has had a long global presence, as we can see from this commemorative stamp, and its presence in many parts of the world, including Singapore, here. Notice in particular the architecture outside and the frames of references inside, as is Jainism. This is a stamp honoring a Jain teacher from Germany. And there are Mahavir, the founder of the current version of the Jain tradition, the prophet of our time, is here in the Hindu temple in Cleveland. Religions of India include many, as Professor Numeric told you a few minutes back, but in today's talk, let me see if this will work. We'll work only with the Hindu, the Sikh, and I was told it would take a couple of seconds longer than, depending on the telephone interferences here. Oops, and then it jumps. And the Sikh tradition. Is there a way of making this a little bit more smooth? No? Okay, it's not working. Okay, let's see. Okay. Would you mind if I just spoke like this? You can hear me? Good. Today, I'll be talking about the historical context of these traditions in America, as well as the shared spaces, the many shared spaces between the traditions. We'll be talking about the appropriation of select phenomena by American and Indian cultures, the accommodation and transmission, as we see in architecture and performing arts, what I call an embodied cosmology. The first part of my talk will be chronological. But before we start, I'd like to recognize a most auspicious day that we had yesterday. It was our New Year. Yes, you can wish me a Happy New Year. And it was a Happy New Year. It was a New Year in many parts of India. And it was the auspicious day of Vaisakhi in the Sikh tradition. And we'll be learning a little bit more about it, possibly. Huh? Oh, pointed there. Okay. And then it jumps. I apologize for that. Here. Well, we'll try again. We'll keep trying. Okay. They did celebrate the New Year in the the Hindu temple out here in Columbus, Ohio, the Bharatiya temple. Bharatiya means Indian. And we may wonder why it's called Indian. Because there are many, many Hindu traditions. We have to speak about it in the plural. Diversity is a key part of anything we have to understand. So anything I tell you, there'll be probably an exception to it. So we call it the Bharatiya Hindu temple, and many Hindus in smaller communities try to bring together a number of people just so, let's see again. I'm sorry this talk will take a little longer than I anticipate because it's taking a while to get through the slides. I was hoping to go very fast. Can I just talk from the back and use a laptop? You have to change the battery. Let's see if that works. No, I can't.
She's on the next slide.
No, I have hundreds. It's very important that I have control over. Okay. This way? Towards the computer. Just one tap. Okay. And it was a happy new year not just for Indians, but I've been getting emails wishing me New Year from Cambodia and Thailand. Because the last 2 days were called the Songkran, or New Year, in many parts of South and Southeast Asia. And the Gurudwara in Columbus also celebrated the Baisakhi, a day in which the Khalsa, the sacred community, had been founded. It was also on that day, although this is not spoken about in the celebration of Baisakhi, that one remembers a very important historical act in the Sikh community. In 1919, when the Sikh, a large community had been gathered to celebrate Baisakhi in a non-violent way in India, General Dyer, a British general, opened fire on them. This, called the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, was enormously influential in galvanizing Hindus, Sikhs, and many other communities in India towards a freedom movement. And General Dyer was honored by the British government for that. But Baisakhi, celebrated by the Sikhs way up in the north, the Hindu-Tamil New Year in the south, the Tamil New Year in South and Southeast Asia, are all very important and part of the shared geographic and other spaces. Other spaces, cultural and conceptual, notions of reincarnation, notions of the immortality of the soul are common in many of the Indian traditions, including Jain, Sikh, and Hindu. Dr. Ten, whom we'll be talking about a little bit more later, spoke about reincarnation. This was a lecture that he gave in 1959, and we'll be talking a little bit more about him soon. Am I pronouncing his name right? So the shared spaces have historically gone between all of South Asia and Southeast Asia because the traditions in those days, the different sectarian traditions of Hinduism, moved across the Bay of Bengal to the countries that we today call Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, and Burma, and so on. Hinduism, and we'll say immediately by comparison, Jainism and Sikhism too, are global religions. Hinduism in 3 ways, and the other 2 in some of these ways. A, there are sizable numbers of Hindu immigrants and people descended from them in different parts of the world. Local populations have converted or become adopted Hindu or other ways of life. Whether it be the Khmer aristocracy in Cambodia way back 1500 years ago, and they're the people who built Angkor Wat, or the ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, also known as Hare Krishnas today, although there is some debate whether they want it to be called Hindu. This is a problematic term for many people. Many people. Oh, we're not Hindu. We're really Vedic. And you find the ISKCON members in many parts of the world in summer. They block off entire roads in Paris, from Châtelet to Gare du Nord, while the procession of these chariots go, the Hindu chariots go. And that's impressive, to have the roads blocked off in Paris. Trying again. We also have local populations, Euro-Americans, who have converted and adopt what they think is a Sikh way of life. Now, whether these people are Hindu, whether they identify themselves as Hindu or Sikh, or whether the other populations accept them as that, those are issues that are up for discussion. I apologize. Okay. Third, another way in which these traditions can be called global, is that ideas derived from Hindu or Sikh or Jain traditions are decontextualized from the socio-cultural milieu and taken out, distanced from the names, and they become part of the cultures outside. Now, an important caveat, I don't mean to say that the people who do it are Hindu. It's just those ideas which are originally found in the larger Hindu context are taken out and made part of other things. And we will be coming back to these ideas, this particular idea soon. And then it goes jumps 2 or 3. Okay. It doesn't do anything even then. Okay. Ideas of Jainism, non-violence particularly, which is so associated with Mahatma Gandhi, a Hindu, have, as we all know, influenced Martin Luther King Jr. But Mahatma Gandhi himself lived in the state of Gujarat and was heavily influenced by Jain friends. And in fact, sorry, I'm looking into the frame of what's going on in this context. Okay. Even if we go to the place where Gandhi lived, the ashram, where he lived in Gujarat, the first thing that we see are notions of truth and non-violence. His weapons against the British rule. And he said, I have nothing new to teach the world. Truth and non-violence are as old as the hills. They're also the most important part of the Jain tradition, and they become an important part of his way of thinking. Next. The global Hindu context that we call Hindu traditions moved and were adopted by various countries in South and Southeast Asia at the beginning of this era. It went to Laos, Thailand. This was a Shiva temple there, enormous. And Angkor Wat near Siem Reap. Next. The only flag in the world with a Hindu temple on it is Cambodia. Next. Angkor Wat. The name Angkor Wat comes from back please. Back. Yeah, back. Yeah. Angkor comes from the word Nagar, which means city, and Wat means courtyard. Let me just try this one more time. And the pathways leading and the causeway leading to Angkor Wat, the length of these were all very important. No one knew that these had any cosmic significance. But in 1975, the French released the measurements in metric units. And the following year, 3 graduate students from the University of Michigan went through these measurements, historical science, and one from art, artistry, and one in astronomy, trying to figure out what would have been the unit of measurement used in building this Hindu temple Jain Temple in the 12th century. Why? Because there was no standard unit of measurement in those days. The king's hand, the patron's hand, the shoulder to the tip of the finger, was actually the unit of measurement. The temple embodied the king or the patron, and the temple embodied the universe, the cosmos. Using these measurements, they tried to figure out what was going on, and they were surprised to find that the measurements actually corresponded to the Indian mythological calendar of the Golden Age, the Iron Age, and so on. Not just that, like many of the Mesoamerican temples, this too was located, and of course the pyramids, was located on astronomically sensitive areas, such that on spring equinox and on autumn equinox, the sun rose exactly behind the central star. So I mean, I spent part of my sabbatical 10 years back taking these pictures. So bang on spring equinox, it goes right behind the central star. That is something which you don't find in temples in the diaspora today. That was a very much part of, that is, identifying the place you worshipped in with the entire cosmos was a very important part of the way of life, living in harmony with nature. It's not all that far removed from going to some of the cathedrals in Europe, where on the feast day of the patron saint, the rising sun comes straight through the central door into the nave, and some scholars have worked on that. Fast forwarding to the 19th century, so one way of Hinduism being spread in the early part of the first millennium CE was Southeast Asia. The second part, fast forwarding to the 19th century, we have multiple things happening. The second wave of migration, indentured workers, a labor force going to many parts of the world. Next, please. In 1834, many people from India were transported to different parts of the world because with the abolition of slavery, the British needed workers. So the origins of the Indians in the Caribbean and many parts of the world, Fiji and so on, goes back to this time. Look at the date, 1834. It's exactly at this time that something else is going on too. And that is, this is of course in Trinidad. Next please. Still in the 19th century, next. The encounter with the Hindu traditions in North America is taking a very disembodied form. The New England Transcendentalists. Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, and so on. And then followed by a very embodied encounter, dancing with the deity. In the 20th century, you find Ruth Sandeni and Ted Shawn introducing Hindu narrative to America. You just have to go through Emerson's journals. They are such fun. I think I have his book checked out from my library for the last 10 years. This poem, which was published in the Atlantic, is straight from the Bhagavad Gita. But actually, you want to read a poem which is called Hamatreya. Hamatreya is character based on a character in the Vishnu Purana Hindu text called Maitreya. And instead of the Sanskrit name, you've got a very typical American name. A wonderful, most moving poem showing the impermanence of the world and impermanence of life. And in that poem, Emerson writes about the farmers and the landlords of New England. And they all look at this earth and they say, I own this earth. And earth laughs in her nocturnal flowers and says, all these boys who thought they owned me, they now lie within my lap. And I contain them. And that's exact verse, with the exception of the New England farmers called the Vishnu Purana. Now, in those days, we don't call it plagiarism, it's just inspired by such thoughts. And then, of course, Thoreau. What can be more American than Thoreau? In the morning, he writes in Walden, I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonic philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. Since its composition, years of the gods have elapsed, actually only 2,000, but details. And as he's writing this, he finds people who are in Walden Pond chipping away at the ice. And the ice, huge icebergs, are going to be transported to India. And he is struck by that. And he writes, I lay down the book and go to my well for the water. And lo, I meet the servants of the Brahmin. And they have come to draw water for his master. So the water, the iceberg is going to India. And I draw from the well from the Bhagavad Gita. And our buckets, as it were, grate together in the same well. The pure Walden water is mingled with the sacred water of the Ganges. 150 years after that, the waters were literally mingled when they did a consecration of the Hindu temple in Ashland, hardly 10 15 miles from here. It was quite incredible. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, we have migrations of the Sikhs and a few Hindus who are collectively called Hindus. And can we go through these quickly? These are the Sikh workers coming to Vancouver. And the Sikh immigrants came from Hong Kong. Canada then passed a law saying they should have $250. Europeans only $20. And they should be in a vessel which will make a non-stop trip all the way before they reach Canada. Now, that's impossible from India. So that was part of the problem. So these are pictures from various parts of Oregon and Washington states showing them working on the railroad system. They helped construct a railroad, picture here in 1909. And the library system has digitized many of these wonderful pictures. With the coming of the Sikhs, what happens? We have the racism coming in. Hindus hounded from the city. And they call them Hindus collectively, even though they belong to different religions. Of these many Sikhs, I'd like to mention just one, because he is one of the best known in terms of the political processes, Bhagavad Singh, who applied to be a citizen, American citizen, based on a number of factors, including the fact that Indians are normally called Caucasians. And twice it was overturned after he was granted citizenship. And it was overturned because the judges thought that, and it went all the way up, that by the word Caucasian, we did not think about Indians. So it doesn't matter. He was not simply a person of political stature. He also did a lot of spiritual writing, but taking from a wide range of texts, Hindu, Jain, and Sikh himself. This is one of his lectures, Sikh Saviors, 60 free lectures on divine. And the postscript here, just one quick note before we get back to the same time period. Next. Talking of the political legacy of the Sikhs, Dilip Sound was among the first congressmen from India to be elected here. President Obama recently recognized his name and called him a trailblazer. Parliament of World Religions. We're still in the cusp between the 19th and the 20th century. This is well known for the coming of Asia to India, to America. And here we find an early Jain encounter. This is Gandhi, but not the Gandhi you know. It's Gandhi before Gandhi. His name is Veer Chand Gandhi, and he is a Jain. He belongs to the Jain religion, which was started in the 6th century BCE. The presence of Gandhi at this parliament was wonderful. He spoke on nonviolence, he spoke on religion of India, but he was dominated by the presence of Vivekananda, whose name becomes better known. But he gave many lectures on India, and that's a picture on the top right there, of Vivekananda, Gandhi, and many others. Here is an interview in the New York Times with Veer Chand Gandhi, speaking on the religions of India, speaking on caste, how it was established, and so on. And it was he who gave a real voice to the many parts of Indian civilization that had not been mentioned by Vivekananda and others. But Swami Vivekananda is probably the best known of the delegates to the Parliament of World Religions. He and Yogananda, who came in the early 20th century, did something remarkable. They take out those intellectual and what they call quote-unquote spiritual aspects of the Hindu tradition, which they think of as universal, not a thing bound by religion, and believe that these practices can be done by people of any tradition. This is something that comes back to bite the Hindus in the late 20th century, because they claim in the late 20th century that the best stuff of Hinduism was taken by people called universal, distant from the word Hindu. In other words, you can be Catholic and you can do this meditation. You can be Methodist and you can do the yoga. And it's been taken away, stripped of its religious paraphernalia and context. And so all the good stuff is not associated with Hinduism. It's the worst part that's associated with it. But Yogananda, Vivekananda were all good because they believed it. They thought that this is a tradition which is not bounded by historical framework. Yoga, transcendental meditation of Mahesh Yogi, and so on. And we'll come back to this. Next, please. Material culture was also very well known in the age of the sale. Starting in the late 18th century, many New England shipmen went to India and brought back material culture, which you find today in the Cleveland Museum of Art. Wonderful pieces. And they also brought back their own very careful journals. And they were curiously non-judgmental. When they found many of the activities in India, the Hindus, they kept detailed, almost ethnographic accounts. But we're not quick to jump to judgment, unlike the British, who said, well, look how bad it is, they need us ruling them. But the Americans, one of them even saw an act of sati, and that's their business at that point. Oh, sati. It's an act in which, in some cases, a woman immolated herself on the pyre of her husband. It was not done often, it was not done in many places, that doesn't justify it, nevertheless it was a heinous act. And it was abolished in the mid-19th century. Still, it was something that both the British and the Indians worked to abolish. But when the Americans came to the soil, they wrote about it, not that they were about it, but this is something that their religions did. And then in the early 20th century, you find a different kind of encounter with the performing arts. Ruth Sandeni and Ted Shawn introduced the Indian dance and deities in a very embodied way to hear. Here, that's two Americans dressed up as Radha and Krishna. Can we go to the next few fairly quickly, please? Look at the calendar image of the god Krishna. That's Ted Shawn as Krishna. The next one. And that is Radha. Here, Lakshmi, the goddess Lakshmi, and that the elaborate set that she did actually to sit as, and that's Ruth and then Radha. Next, please. And now we come to the third major wave of migrations. Why? Economic opportunities, post-1965, political refuge, and then people in the second diaspora. And we'll be looking at a number of issues here quickly, if we can. Architecture. The first temples were set up. What happens when you have a quorum of people? You build a place to worship. But it becomes more than a place to worship. It becomes a community hall. It becomes a place of culture. It becomes a place where you teach your language and you teach the children to dance. You pass on the music and the dance, and through it, the narratives, the stories that you carry with you. And here is the first Sikh Gurudwara. Architecture, also designed to help meditative practices. The Hindu god Shiva, who had several temples in Southeast Asia. The temples in Southeast Asia only had 5 floors after the mantra you used to meditate Om Namah Shivaya. It had 5 syllables. And here, in these temples from Southeast Asia and the next one, which seem more like Chichen Itza and Mesoamerican temples and the pyramids than Indian ones, the Shiva temples had 5 floors. So it was a theology in stone. Next. In America, the first Hindu temple, which later people said was neither Hindu nor a temple, but more like a Protestant church, because it had pews, was built by Swami Trigunatita, the disciple of Swami Vivekananda, in California, in San Francisco. Next, please. And there are accommodations which are made internal and external. Next. This is the first temple. It was called the Vedanta Temple. And it had 5 towers. And it was very carefully designed. From a tower on the right side which looked like a mosque, to one which looked like a European castle, to other temple towers which supposedly come from India. He designed this as a very syncretic monument. Next, please. And the entrance to this is now stripped of its colors and the neon lights that it came with. But it was supposed to be symbolic of yogic anatomy. There was an eagle on the top, can you see it? And the eagle is a sacred bird in the Hindu tradition. How fortuitous, because this is important in America. And the paint on this was red, white, and blue. No, it was nothing connected to the American flag. That was a nice coincidence. But those are the colors of the 3 Indian gods, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. And the lights at the side are supposed to be the internal anatomy which led up to the yogic center in the crown. Next, please. In the post-1965 era, Hindus created what they call the authentic temple experience. And the rest of our story has been the search for authenticity. The reconceptualization and the reconstruction of what is authentic, and to rebuild that, what we retain, what we jettison, what we transform. I'd like to go to the next few slides very fast to give you an idea of the architecture, because we are trying to emulate. Oh, let's stop here for a minute. It's not reciprocal. If you go back one slide, you will see the New York Temple. This was the Hindu god Ganesha, the elephant-faced god. And he became so popular that people who went from America to India wanted to worship him. So, the next slide. In the city of Chennai in Madras, they had a new temple called the New York Ganesha Temple. And that's what they say there, New York Shri Mahavallabha Ganapati Swami Sannati. So it goes back like a pizza to India. The next, please. These spires are North Indian towers, but you find them in different parts of this continent: Calgary, Augusta, South Africa, and Texas. It's a curvy linear tower. Next, please. And now we'll go to the temple which vies along with the New York one to be the first authentic temple in this continent, Pittsburgh. And then the next few: Orlando, Bridgewater, New Jersey. Next one, Malibu, Shiva Vishnu Temple in Miami, Shiva Vishnu Temple in Maryland. Shiva and Vishnu are the two prominent gods of Hinduism. Rama, an incarnation of the god Vishnu, temple in Lemon. You know it well. And now we come to more unfamiliar territories. Yes, indeed it is. And in fact, the Hindus said a prayer in the local capital. Next, please. Nashville, next. The authenticity is through architecture and ritual. The next. In 1996 Atlanta, 100 jars of water taken from different rivers of India and America, were put in these 1,008 jars, 1,008, not 1,000. And next, poured over the tower to celebrate the transformation of this tower in 1992 to the next one, this in 1996. But no Hindu temple is ever complete. Next, from the blueprint to the next, to the reality, it took about 25 years. And by the time they finish it, they've outgrown it. So they're building new facilities in the back. Next. And you can keep going through it. I kept following their transformation from the 4x8 to this, and that was the actual architect who Indianized the temple. The one in the previous slide is the person who Indianized this. And you can see the various stages of this. And the last slide shows you the American flag post 9/11. And you see now, can you go back? Thank you. This will show a similar transformation of the Aurora Temple from the late 90s to keep going. 2003 to now 2014. And it's still growing. And it's one of many there. Next. But notice the architecture. It's not that the people who built Aurora Temple on the right knew about the temple in Thailand, but the architecture is as equally majestic. Next. A recollection of home architecture of the temples, whether it's Jain, Sikh, or Hindu, is paramount in the diaspora. And next, this is the Golden Temple, which is the most sacred place of the Sikh community. And yesterday, when we went to the Baisakhi celebrations, right behind the person who's reading from the holy text, you find the holy temple, the Golden Temple, the pictures of it. It is this evoking of what is true, what is authentic, what is hope, what is the center of your faith, that makes this a real center, not an affiliate, not a periphery, it makes it a center. Next, please. So, one of the holiest shrines for the Sikh community, where a guru in the 17th century had been martyred by the Muslim Emperor Aurangzeb, Shishganj. This central part, housed under that, is the sacred book, the palpable voice of the divine, which is seen through the words of the Guru Granth Sahib, is placed in the most respectful manner under this canopy. This is the teacher. This is divine, this is the text. In fact, a few years back, when India issued the stamp of this sacred text, the Guru Granth Sahib, it was quickly withdrawn because the Sikh community objected to it. Why? Not because they issued the stamp, but it was shown as a book, without it being in a proper, respectful accoutrement and the clothing and the cloth that covers it up, so to speak. The next, please. But this canopy, the next one, is seen, as you can see on the right side, in the Silat Road Sikh Temple in Singapore, the next. And in the Jain Temples, whether it's Atlanta or Ohio, the sacred places are again recalled here in the paintings on the walls. The mythical, the most sacred places are oaks. I'm sorry about this typo. The holy places from Karnataka, India, the next. And other sites are on the wall of the Jain Temple in Columbus, Ohio, in the room where the kids are taught. So by looking at it every week, these places are internalized, they become part of the spiritual vocabulary. Next. Visually, this is the Jain Temple in the state of Gujarat. It owes more to a local state, the ethnicity. And you find this in Jain and Hindu temples. The next. And this is a Jain temple but in Gujarat, but as we go along next, you find it in Chicago. Why, it was difficult to choose 3 out of thousands of slides here of that temple. It is a magnificent temple. Please do see it sometime. The next. Or in the Jain temples in Columbus or Atlanta, where they recall this flavor. Next. The shared spaces, however, have a lot of accommodations, internal and external. Next. And in the diaspora here, the Hindu temples include many Hindu gods. Next. Unlike the pre-modern temples in India, and more like the Khmer or Cambodian temples, many temples in America are non-sectarian. And I'll come back to this point. There are some exceptions, like I said, there are always exceptions. There are some which say, some Hindu communities say, this is my God, only that God, no one else. Next. For instance, the non-sectarian community, Cleveland. The Hindu temple is a Vedic temple. It serves all. And so it tries to bring together the worshippers of the god Shiva and the worshippers of the god Vishnu. The next. Kalamazoo and Lansing have multiple gods like this. Next. Here, the Lakshmi Ganapati temple in Columbus. Yes, and that's... Oh, there you are. And he's not... What is that familiar dude out there? Next. But there is a precedent. There is a background of people think it was new. It's diasporic. Right one, Cincinnati. It's like a blue painting. And you just go and worship your God and you go. And on the left, however, you find a whole variety of gods in Badami in 6th century culture in India. Now, time out for a minute. Pop quiz. How many gods are there in Hinduism? And go to right. We had 2 answers, 1 and 330 million. Give or take. And there's a conversation in the 6th century BC scripture between 2 people. How many gods are there? 330 million. Are you sure? 330. Really? 33. Are you sure? 3. Really? 3? 1.5. 1.5. 1 times 330 million. 3 puts it back. Why? Because numbers, like gender, are human constructs. Though although the mathematicians would say that they're done, why should the god be 6 feet tall and male? So it's part of the infinity. At the same time, this supreme being can manifest itself in a zillion forms. So one of the old Vedic hymns says, Sahasra Shirksha Purusha, there are 1,000 heads. So you read and think, oh, then 2,000 feet and 2,000 eyes, right? No, 1,000. That's Raksha Sahasrapa. 1,000 eyes and 1,000 feet. And then it says, he is everything, he is covered of every piece of ground, every space. He is what was, what is, and what is in the future. He covers the entire universe and then extends 10 finger lengths beyond. So if everything you can think of plus your hands span, that infinity is like you try to grasp it in numbers. And then of course, because we're human beings, we fight over my God is bigger than your God. So anyway, next please. Since the 1990s, Sai temples have been dedicated to a historical person called Sai Baba, who lived in this time. His birth is not known, whether he was Muslim. But those temples, which have become popular in India, have also become popular here. Next 2 or 3 slides. This is in Aurora. Next to the big Hindu temple I showed you. The Hindu temples will not include what, quote unquote, the mainstream ones, quote unquote, will not include Sai Baba, but the Sai temples will include other Hindu gods. Next, please. And this is in Florida. And so you have a huge room with this historical person and his site where he attained samadhi or died. One of the most popular places today in India. Next, please. There are internal accommodations. There are a number of Jain sectarian movements. Digambar, Vekambar, these are all groups within the Jain community. Or Stanakwati who do not believe in any images. So the Jain Temple here in Columbus will accommodate. Notice the right 2 icons, they're different from the left one. They're very simple. Here. And that shows the difference in the sectarian movement. And the room which is totally empty, devoid of images for those who do not believe in it. Next, please. So there are internal accommodations done. But nevertheless, splits do occur. In Augusta, Georgia, where there were like about 24 families, Sikh families, and there were 2 Sikh gurudwaras when I went. So you do find different groups coming up. Next, please. But it's not just within the Hindu traditions, it's between Hinduism and Jainism, where they try to share spaces by. This is going back to the cultural space I spoke earlier about that trying to negotiate a common area. Next, please. So you find this in Pittsburgh, Georgia, where you have all the Hindu deities, here Cleveland, and then Mahavira on one side. The Jain 24th teacher of the Jain tradition who lived circa 6th century BCE. Next, please. And here in Kentucky, Hindu and Jain. So these are 2 different religious traditions, but they share the same space. But the more remarkable one is the next one. Oh, next one. Okay. You may think that this is new, this accommodation. But in these sites in Karnataka, India, the first 3 caves are Hindu, and the 4th one is Jain. Next. And the most unusual temple in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is Jain, Hindu, and Sikh. I may be wrong, but that's the only one that I know of which accommodates all 3. Though someone told me that the Sikh people have now their own space. Why? Largely logistical, financial, and so on. It's expensive maintaining temples. And as it is, people are wondering what they're going to be doing next time around. When this generation goes, who's funding these temples? Next. This is from the Allentown with the Sikh Gurudwara, with this holy text inside. Next. Temples are cultural centers. Next. We learn stories and philosophies from the carvings. Next. The carving here in Southeast Asia, the churning of the ocean of milk, which is the biggest story in Cambodia. It's an Indian story that the Cambodians made their own. It's a minor story in India, became the biggest one in Cambodia. And when the Thai people made a sculpture of this story in the middle of the Thai Bangkok airport, a huge one, the Cambodian people went nuts. How can they take our story? Don't believe me, just look up the YouTube, the comments on the YouTube on the building of the churning of the ocean of milk. Why are the Thai people taking our story? Next. Performance. Next. This is the key part of my presentation, and that is, it's through performance that the traditions are transmitted to the next generation and communities are formed. And performances are many. Ritual performance, performing arts, largely here from South Asia, music and dance. It's a very embodied way of showing the stories. Next. Can you go back? The story of the goddess Durga killing the buffalo demon being danced in Emory University. This is how children learn the story. Next. Vishnu, the all-pervasive one, lies on the serpent. The serpent is called Ananta, without end. So it shows the coming together of the all-pervasive one on infinity. Next. Next. Dance schools are kept in temples, this one in Cleveland. Next. And dances are done inside temples in America, where it's illegal in India. It's illegal in India because the women who did dances in the 19th century were Devadasis, temple courtesans, and it was made illegal. But in America, you go back to the pre-colonial days, and dance is a way of worship. And here they are dancing inside the Temple of Atlanta. Next. Welcoming the goddess. Next. Next. This just to give you an idea of the saints and deities who are being danced. Next. And how it's taught to little children. Performance of ritual as well as performing arts. Next. And of course in popular culture. Next. Garba, a very popular folk dance for the Jain and Hindus from the state of Gujarat. Garba means womb, and this honors the supreme power as feminine, as the womb of energy. And you dance the nights away in honor of the Mother God. Next. Performing arts here in Columbus, where you sing and recite the sacred word. This is how you internalize the word. Next. And food, talking of internalizing. Next. Temples are all about food. This is where we went for lunch today. But the earlier slide, can you go back? The crepe that she's having there, that's the dosa. Most religious institutions are all about food. Next. Next. The Jain tradition has very specific diet, not just vegetarian, but certain vegetables. You find that in menus in India. So that's a menu, which is, like saying vegetarian, you have Jain. Next. The modified kitchen here in Columbus is not to allow for active cooking with the stoves because the smell of the food may distract from those who are fasting. But for most other traditions, the Sikh and the Hindus in here, it's not the fasting, it's the feasting. Next. These are the kitchens in the Pittsburgh Temple. Next. Aurora, dosa. Next. Aurora. Next. Yesterday, at the Sikh Langar here, a communal meal. Eating together is the most important part of the religious tradition. Next. These are the sweets made for a Hindu festival of Diwali. Next. Next. And this is all in Gainesville, Florida. Next. Accommodation, sambar rice here in Columbus, Ohio for the grown-up. Cheese pizza for children. Next. Newer themes, newer gender roles, adapting to traditional activities, volunteering. Let me try if I can go faster on this. Education is most important. This is the education room. Next. For children, the temples give you free horoscopes at birth to encourage children to come. Next. Children and performing arts, right in the temple. Next. Next. And children are center stage. They're not periphery. They're not in a separate room. They're right here. It's for them that the temples have been built. That's little Arjun. Next. Women have different roles. They carry. They're active in the rituals here in Atlanta. Next. New rituals to go with civil religion. Next. This is a graduating puja for new graduates, addressed to Saraswati, with whom we began this talk. Next. Mother's Day in the Shiva Vishnu Temple. Next. Blood donation. Blood is polluting in the Hindu tradition, and then the temples encourage it. Next. Hindu Temple of Atlanta blood drive. Next. Here in Columbus, free medical clinics. Next. Thanksgiving dinner for the homeless in Kalamazoo. Next. Humanitarian help for the Gujarat earthquake, or the Gandhi food drive in Cincinnati. I don't know why they call it a Gandhi food drive. He was always fasting. Next. Ecological awareness in India. Next. This is in Tirupati in India. Next. This is the one I was writing about. Next. Much less has been done on this front in this country than it's been in India. In Aurora Temple, it's going green. Next. In popular culture, is Hinduism. This is the last part. Is yoga Hindu, Jain, Sikh, or Buddhist, or none of the above? Next. Well, in popular culture, this is a Hindu god, Shiva. And that, of course, is also a god of a sort. Next. Who owns yoga? Is yoga Hindu? Next. You can see the antecedents in the 7th century sculpture. And that's in Tampa. Next. But the Stora yoga, the Yahweh yoga. Now, it is an appropriation of something that is part of a larger system in which you attain union with the divine, stripping it of all it. It's a very selective appropriation. But the important part of it is this is how world religions are communicating constantly with each other. And if we think we don't do it, we go back to the history of heaven and hell in the Christian traditions, and we see where it comes from, and we can trace it all the way back to Zoroastrianism. Next, Christian Yoga Union, the Christian Yoga metaphysics. Next, Wiccan Yoga, Zen Yoga. Next, and of course Zen, the word Zen comes from the Indian word dhyana, or meditation. That's a historical fact. Next, I like this. And my favorite is the next one. So, there are applications that you and I may not be aware of. So, what I'm talking about, the last 3 slides, please. Next. The final word about yoga, yoga garden in the White House during Easter. Easter Bunny does the Virabhadra asana. Next. Yoga, according to the White House, has become a universal language of spiritual. Is it? Is it spiritual? Is it just an exercise? Is it stress relief? It's a serious question. It's what people make tenure on. Crossing many lines of religion and cultures, the White House said, and without any reference to the ongoing controversy to the lawsuit. Next. Every day it says, and Paula is the president's athletic day, says, we practice yoga to improve health and overall well-being. So that's the White House. What more can I add here? So the last final thing, quest, is a pop quiz. We started off talking about different states and shared cultural states. It's a pop quiz. The most important Indian festival is called Diwali, the festival of lights. The question is it done for any of these? All these are Hindu events. And yes, there are multiple reasons for doing Hinduism. But Jainism and the Sikh tradition also celebrate Diwali. And in fact, we have a coming together of different traditions in America. Thank you. The last slide. I came across a saying which I loved, and I just keep it there because it's a booster shot for me. You must never be limited by external authority, whether it be vested in a church, man, or book. It's your right to question, challenge, and investigate. So wonderful to you. Thank you so much, and I apologize if it's so twice as long as I intended because of